The U.S. is on track to see over 1 million EV sales this year, a record number. But it took nearly a quarter century for us to get here. And though now you'll find plenty of governments the world over advocating for a full transition to electric transportation, filmmaker Chris Paine remembers a time where that was just a pipe dream. Paine directed the 2006 film Who Killed the Electric Car and its 2011 sequel, Revenge of the Electric Car. Both are nominations for Best Documentary from the Environmental Media Awards, with the latter winning the honor. The first installment documented the early struggles with getting an EV to market, while the second film examined the subsequent bounce back that electrified cars experienced. While hype is high for EVs in 2023, has the market hit its ceiling, or are more record sales numbers on the horizon? Chris Paine joins us to discuss where the industry goes from here. Chris, your films documented the ups and downs of electric vehicles since the early 2000s, from the death of GM's EV1 and then later Revenge, led by Tesla and Nissan. Where are we in the electric vehicles journey today?
Well, we're definitely in Act 2. I don't know if it's like a 5-act opera or a 3-act movie, but we're not where we were 20 years ago. When we made that first film about the GM EV1, there were literally like 5,000 electric vehicles on the road, highway-capable vehicles, and by the end of it, they were like almost zero. So now we're at millions and millions of electric cars. I think the market is up to worldwide market is something like 18% of all vehicles sold. It's a huge, huge shift. And yet, most people don't have electric cars. There's questions about them still, and we don't know, what these next few years are going to look like. But a lot of people are betting that it's going to be pretty electric.
What would you say is currently the biggest challenge to getting more EVs on the road? What's the biggest hurdle to that future of being more electric?
Well, I think, just anecdotally, I'd say that we're the pickup trucks. There's a lot of people that cars are great, but a lot of people would like a decent truck that they could count on. And they're coming. The Chinese certainly have a lot on, and the Ford F-150s out there. Rivian's got a truck, but they're still really expensive. They're not readily available. So I think that's a big one. The second one would be chargers. And we live in Los Angeles, so it's a complete no-brainer in California to have an EV or an SUV. There are chargers everywhere, especially for Teslas. But in a lot of places, people just aren't sure. They don't want to get stuck. They know where a gas station is. So where's the charger? And there's a lot of money being put into that, especially for delivery vehicles, ironically. I think the apartment building challenge is a little bit more complicated. But those would be the top two issues, I'd say.
Yeah, range anxiety is definitely something that we've seen consumers be wary of when going out to purchase an electric vehicle. You mentioned all that money that's going in to more charging infrastructure. When we look at the bipartisan infrastructure bill, how do you feel that money that they're putting into more charging infrastructure with that piece of legislation will ultimately kind of assuage some of these fears?
Well, I'm not a fan of putting chargers at every Walmart and CVS and so forth, because when you really want to charge, you don't want 10 minutes of charge. You'd like to be able to just charge at night when you're sleeping at your house or your apartment building. Or you want to be on the road and there's a big station, you pull in just like a gas station and you get most of the charge you need in 5 or 10 minutes. That's certainly the way that's working here. So spending that money smartly, as always, whenever you talk about government spending, you really got to think about what's the best way to do it. Certainly putting in charging infrastructure for delivery vehicles and trucking makes a lot of sense. And if they could get money into people with HOAs and apartment buildings and so forth, they can build chargers, that's a good use of money too.
As we're talking about potential hurdles to a more electric future, building these vehicles still has some environmental challenges. How do you think the industry overcomes this?
Well, this is a complicated issue. There's a lot of, whenever you have a big change, there's just a tremendous amounts of fear and misinformation and doubt about it. And frankly, most people don't really want to change what they're doing unless they really understand that it's going to be better for them. The big one that you hear a lot about, and it's what our next film is about, is batteries. What about the battery? What about cobalt and mining and having like deep sea lithium harvesting and nickel and all that? But the real facts on batteries is they're getting a lot cleaner. They're not using cobalt. It's switched to a lithium phosphate, and they're going to lithium sodium, and things are just not nearly as dark and gloomy. The real issue is, how do you ramp up? How do you get these materials, and then how do you keep them in the recycle train? And they've done a great job with lead acid batteries. Traditionally, there are some big exceptions, but I think the environmental worries about electric cars are overplayed.
In your film, Who Killed the Electric Car?, consumers were listed among the guilty parties alongside car oil companies and the government. Have car buyers come around overall, do you think?
Well, make a film and you do something like consumers are guilty or something. And we were trying to make a rhetorical point, just like ultimately the cars people have are ones they can afford to buy and they're used to buy. And I think a lot of people that wanted electric cars have had the opportunity to buy it or can get them now. When we made the film, that first film 20 years ago, you couldn't even buy an electric vehicle. So we were arguing, why is this not a choice on the table? And now that here we are, it's really a choice for more and more people. And then people have a chance to buy it or see the neighbor has one and say that it works for them or it doesn't.
As people have had an opportunity to buy them recently, we saw early adopters fuel an early EV rush, setting new sales records for the industry, but the rate of EV sales has since decreased. How do you believe the industry will adapt to this problem and appeal to a new consumer base?
Yeah, I think there's like a little trickle like that, but if you look at the way that people gave up on horses slowly, and I think gas cars overtook horses in 1924 or something. And there's like little ripples. Industry can't catch up, or the price isn't right. There's always going to be pullbacks in growth. But I think just the value proposition of not having to buy gasoline, having all your energy made in the U.S., which is what electricity is, and also the kind of superior performance in most cases, electric vehicles, with range being an issue in really cold climates. There's some exceptions, but most people will just find a better driving experience, and that's going to keep this thing growing.
Looking ahead at the future of EVs to 2024, do you see partisanship playing a role here? Are there stakes for electric vehicles in the upcoming election?
Yeah, I don't know why electric vehicles would be a partisan issue. It certainly is, because it's seen as part of some kind of giveaway or subsidy or something. The government's prioritizing it because it does create less CO2. There's less toxins that go in the environment when you're doing electric vehicles over fossil fuel vehicles. But there's been subsidies for oil and all kinds of things. So I think the politics of it, the partisanship, have to be with where people want subsidy money to be spent. And people that are used to getting their oil subsidy money, they want to keep getting it. And people that are looking for electric vehicles and electrified transportation to move up, they want their subsidies. So that's maybe the partisanship, because I don't think the fundamentals of mobility need to be partisan.
Do you have any thoughts on Tesla's upcoming Cybertruck? Is this something you could see being a potential game changer for the EV industry?
I don't know what to make of that vehicle. It's a complicated vehicle. I know that Elon loves it, and there's a lot of excitement about it from some people. But I think I'm more of a classic pickup truck guy. An F-150 Rivian guy would be more exciting for me. But Tesla keeps showing that there's just something we didn't expect, and something that we might actually find. And that was sort of the Steve Jobs approach to developing technology. So maybe the Cybertruck is this huge market that we'll find out about. Certainly, Tesla is making a lot of good moves in a lot of other areas. Maybe the Cybertruck will be that too.
Now, before we let you go, you mentioned earlier you are working on a film about EV batteries and the minerals that go into them. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what can we expect from that film?
Well, we made Who Killed the Electric Car because they repossessed my electric car from 2000, and we weren't allowed to keep the cars. And we thought, well, what's going on? Why are the car companies so against electric vehicles? And obviously that's changed. All the car companies are now really all in on it. When we made the second film about the rise of Tesla and GM's shift in strategy and Nissan, that was more like, okay, the electric car is coming back. Now we're in a position where millions of these cars are being made. So what are the repercussions? And a lot of friends are like, are we just trading fossil fuels for battery problems, heavy metal pollution for something else? So we wanted to dive into that. What the mobility revolution from skateboards all the way to airplanes looks like when you start using electricity instead of oil.
Interesting. Well, I'll definitely be excited to catch that film when you guys wrap up on it. Thank you again so much for joining us here today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Shep.
Thanks, Chris.